Welcome to Don't Ask That Question. I'm Kelly O'Mara, and today I'm happy to have back on the show Sheila Matthews. She's the co-founder of Able Child, a nonprofit dedicated to providing parents with accurate information about their rights and informed consent when it comes to mental health in the schools. Today, Sheila and I are going to discuss the February 14th, 2018 Parkland, Florida school shooting, and specifically, we're going to talk a great deal about Nikola Cruz's sentencing hearing. Nikola Cruz is the person who committed the shooting there at the school and has pled guilty to it. And now they're just in the middle of basically determining whether he'll get life in prison or the death sentence. So Sheila's been tuned into the courtroom from the beginning, listening to the sentencing hearing, and she's here to explain some of the important points that have been made about the shooter's mental health history, and also to talk about a lot of things that haven't been addressed, which is, such as why his mental health providers are not being held responsible. If ever there were mitigating factors, this is the case. It does not excuse Cruz's crime. But good Lord, someone has to consider what was chemically done to his mind from a very young age. Sheila, welcome to the show. First, I have to say that I'm appalled by what I'm hearing in this sentencing hearing, coming from the many psychiatrists who dealt with Cruz throughout his life, and the drugging, the psychiatric drugging that he endured.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for having me on your show. Don't Ask That Question. Perfect title for the show. Let's ask those questions. I am appalled myself. And I do want to say right from the beginning that my heart goes out to any parent that loses a child. Able Child has been involved with parents who have lost their children to psychiatric drugs. I want to mention two of those children today, Stephanie Hall and Shayna Dunkel. And, so therefore I want to get the politics of victimhood out of the way so we can have a dialogue about legislation, about protecting human rights, and how we can engage in a conversation that's going to be beneficial to society as a whole. So with that said, I just wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of broken hearts in this trial. The biggest broken heart is that of society. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that we can really delve into some of the facts here.
So what I want to do as best as we can, because I've actually gone through several of the taped courtroom sessions that anybody can pull up on YouTube if they want to. But I want to go through the points of his psychiatric drugging from just such a very, very young age. And, you and I were talking before the show, we're trying to figure out, we think that the first actual drugging was before 2007, which would have made him, less than 9 years old, because in 2007, when he was 9 years old, we know that he was seeing a Dr. Kravitz, is that correct? And he is a clinical psychologist. He's not a psychiatrist, so he can't prescribe. But when Nikola Cruz came to him in 2007, he was already on 54 milligrams of Concerta. And, what we can do is kind of go through what the adverse events of Concerta are, because I think that people really need to understand, what's going on in this kid's mind, right? Now, Concerta is an ADHD drug, right? It's prescribed to treat ADHD, right? And so you have nervousness, restlessness, anxiety, sudden outbursts, mental and mood behavior changes, aggression, agitation, abnormal thoughts, and psychosis. Now, this is for a kid who initially was taken, is my understanding, because he had anxiety. That's what the mother first put down on the intake form. So these are all possible adverse events of taking that ADHD drug. So that's again, we don't know when he was actually prescribed this. It has not been revealed in court. And let's just put it right out there. The defense team of Cruz is doing a really lousy job in their only part of a trial. I mean, I can't believe what they're not asking. They're simply going through the list. Yeah, this psychiatrist, he got this and this and this, and then we changed it. They're not asking any questions. It's horrible. It is horrible defense. And I'm going to put it out there. I'm just going to say it. I don't think they understand what they're doing. I think they're incompetent at this point, given all the school shootings. This is the best they can do, is just simply, oh, he was on that drug. Oh, and how many milligrams? That's it. That's pathetic. And let me just add, Nikola Cruz is responsible for this crime. Okay, he's taken responsibility for it. I get that. But he still is entitled to a good defense, and he's not getting it. So, end of my soapbox. I'm just saying I'm very disappointed in his defense.
Well, Kelly, psychiatry is on trial right now. We have a debate in the country that, oh, it's the guns and we have to get rid of the guns. No, this is all about drugging of children from early ages with mind-altering, dangerous drugs. Okay, we have the subjective role that psychiatry plays in the school system. This is evidence without a doubt that the drugs are the causation of this massive killing. It starts very young. You went over the side effects of the Concerta. I am shocked at the defense. They are slow walking each psychiatrist through this trial. They are defending psychiatry. They are not defending this young adult who has committed such a crime. And, we are facing the death penalty in this case. And the fact is that it is all about state of mind. Not once does they soft walk the side effects. They don't ask about whether or not any MedWatch forms were filed on behalf of the child that was clearly having side effects, and I know we'll get into that. They don't talk about any blood work on intake. This is a very unregulated and dangerous industry, psychiatry. And it started out as a carve out in our society and has grown like a weed that controls everything. And it is really an indictment against psychiatry. It's an indictment against the drugging of children. This is the creation of mass murderers. That's what this is.
I have to agree with you. I think that this case, out of all the school shootings, okay, this has given us the most in-depth look at the drugging of one of these shooters. I mean, while I feel like he's getting a horrible defense, at least we're getting to find out how much he was drugged, what he was drugged with, what the cocktail of psychiatric drugs were from a very young age. So let's go back and continue our timeline, because again, we know that he was put on Concerta, an ADHD med, prior to 2007, which in 2007 he would have been 9 years old. So we don't know what the drugging of this kid was prior to 2007. I hope we find it out. But if his defense had been worth their weight, they would have had a big board in the back, chronology of when he was first drugged, what he was drugged with, when they changed it, when they upped it, when they gave him a different drug to add to the drugs that he already was taking. They haven't done that. So it's left to the public. And I think that's purposeful. That's purposeful.
That's right. That's right. And they're very difficult to hear them because they're whispering during
Yes.
their testimony, and they're not giving dosages out. They don't really give the amounts of multiple drugs, but you'll get into that.
So let's go on. So that was in 2007. And he went to a Dr. Kravitz. And when he came to Dr. Kravitz, he was on Concerta, 54 milligrams. Let me add, you're supposed to start people on 18 milligrams of Concerta. 54 milligrams is the highest amount of Concerta you can give someone. So I'm really curious. And again, his attorneys didn't ask, when did he go up to the 54 milligrams? Was he started on 54 milligrams? Because an adult human being would have a hard time with 54 milligrams of Concerta. Okay. In fact, you and I know one of these gentlemen. His name is Bob Schwartz, and I'm going to speak with him actually later today, who had a terrible adverse event when he was taking 54 milligrams of Concerta. So here's a little kid, who was underweight. We know he was underweight at that age, and he's on 54 milligrams. So the next thing is, I guess it's Lori Karp. You want to talk about the psychiatrist Lori Karp?
Yes, so she was the treating psychiatrist to Nicholas Cruz for 3.5 years. She started seeing him in July of 2008 as a referral, and basically, she would spend 15 minutes to a half an hour with him. What I found very fascinating, when the defense team did bring up side effects, the defense team said, "How do you know meds are working?" And basically, this licensed psychiatrist basically said that from parents' feedback.
Right.
Okay. And really, the mom and the parent could be how they're giving the medication to the child. So again, not taking any responsibility from doing any sort of blood work, which I feel is so shocking to me. So parents really should be at the edge of their seat. School is starting, and you are going to be blamed all along the way. Once you believe and fall into this checklist of behavioral diagnosing, and you start to place your child on drugs, just be aware that you will be blamed in the end. So this psychiatrist basically says that, the side effects are going.
First, tell us what she put him on. So we know that he's been on 54 milligrams of Concerta, which isn't helping. It's not helping because his behavior is worse. Okay.
She, I believe, she had him on 2 stimulant meds, and Stratera was then introduced.
I have Stratera, and then she added Risperdal.
Right. Now, Risperdal, now let me remind you, the reason why she put him on, I guess she put him on Stratera, but then he was still getting in trouble in school, and I guess he threw his math book in the pool, and he was getting angry, and so she felt that the Stratera might be causing some agitation. Okay, right there. If I was the defense attorney, I would say, and this is not just for him, this is for anybody. So let's get our emotions off the crime, because we're looking for the causation. I would have said, did you report it to the FDA? You're a mandated reporter. Was a MedWatch report ever submitted to the FDA? That question was not asked. So she started to lower the, there was also 2 non-stimulant, and Kelly, you're much better at these drugs than I am.
Focalin?
Yes, she started to lower that one because a tic had developed.
So remember, he's on Concerta for ADHD. We got to keep people in the loop here. He's on Concerta for ADHD. She takes him off Concerta, puts him on Focalin, which again can cause irritability, depression, restlessness, anxiety, sudden outbursts, mental mood, behavior changes, agitation, aggression, abnormal thoughts. This is what the drug can cause. These are known side effects, okay? So she puts him on a different ADHD drug, Focalin, and then she reduces Strattera, right?
Well, no, she increases Strattera from
Oh.
0.25 to 0.40 because he's still getting these reports in. They don't start decreasing it yet.
Okay, okay. So, and again, she's meeting with this kid, this 10-year-old kid, right? For 15 minutes. How you doing, Sheila? You good at school? You eating? You sleeping? So what does she do? The kid gets 15 minutes of talk therapy, and then but back to the chemical lobotomy. Well, let's change up the drugs. Okay.
So they increased the Strattera from 0.25 to 0.40. Okay. By July, August, and September, they had increased it to 0.50. Okay. So now they're on an increase of the Strattera and a decrease of the Focalin. Okay. So
when did she add the Risperdal?
The Risperdal was when they took him off the Strattera when in 2008, he was having trouble with anger. He threw the notebook in the pool. October 15th, 3 weeks later, they decided to decrease the Strattera, and they introduced Risperdal.
Yeah.
To stabilize his mood. She said that now this is off-label now. Okay, so now we're into off-label again, the defense team is not even asking about what does off-label mean. Off-label means it's not actually, it's
approved. It's not
approved
for that age group.
And not approved for the treatment of ADHD, which he was diagnosed with.
Right.
So they are now introducing a mood stabilizer. And Kelly, what are the side effects of Risperdal? I know that it's an antipsychotic, correct?
No, that's clonidine. You're ahead of yourself with clonidine.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I think that the thing is that it causes irritability, depression, anxiety, psychotic manic symptoms, delusions, hypomania. It could cause those things. Okay. And also remember, Risperdal was that very interesting drug that young boys were growing breasts, remember? And it was a huge lawsuit because young boys were getting D-cup breasts after taking Risperdal.
I think one of the attorneys that we worked with represented that mass class action, Derek Maslow. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. He threatened at that point. Now he's on Risperdal. Okay.
And Strattera.
Well, they had replaced the Strattera with the Risperdal.
Is he taking Focalin and Risperdal at this point?
He was on two, I believe she said he was on two anti-stimulant drugs. Is that what a Focalin is? Okay. And so with the Risperdal, he threatened to stab his teacher.
Right.
Okay. Now, that to me is something I would have reported to MedWatch. That is clearly an indication of a side effect of a mood stabilizer. If your mood is swinging in all different directions, and how old was he at that point?
I think 10. He was 10 years old.
Okay, so to me, I would have looked into that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm thinking this might be a side effect of Risperdal. I believe Risperdal carries a black box warning.
I think it does. No, actually, I think it's clonidine that does. But anyway, the point is now he's into a cocktail of drugs. He's 10 years old. the concerted didn't work at its highest level. The treatment didn't work. So now we're into, we're going to give him a cocktail of drugs, despite the fact that his attorneys in his defense are not saying, hey, these adverse events that have come with these drugs, do you think it's possible that the drug may be responsible for his behavior?
They mentioned nothing.
Nothing. It's unbelievable to me.
No. So then October, this was a big, the replacement of the Risperdal and the discontinuation with Strattera. She had said that it was a main concern of hers was she thought that the Strattera was causing problems with him. If I was the defense team, I would have hammered into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on November 5th, he
Yeah.
then now is getting, he's now starting picking behavior.
Right.
So remember,
it's a compulsive habit. Okay, so and that's caused by these drugs.
That's correct. That's correct. So she basically on November 20th, he ripped up his planner. He hit somebody with a rock.
Right.
At Tomorrow's Rainbow School, and she increased the Focalin from 10 to RX-15, which is the long-acting one.
Right. So now again, we're playing with the cocktail. You know, let's jigger here. Put a little more mind-altering drug here, and that'll make him better.
One of the things that I have to say. One of the doctors said, the one that we talked about before, had said that this was a theory. That's one thing I really did appreciate that he said, was this is all theory.
Well, of course it is.
Yeah. So, and they say it quietly. They say the quiet part out loud is what I believe. I mean, it was a terrible cross-examination of the subjective nature of all this diagnosing and drugging. And it really is the making of a mass murderer. Absolutely, 100%. No guns involved.
Yeah, but it's finally exposing psychiatry. I mean, it really is. It's exposing their chemical lobotomies on these little kids. Really, at this point, that's why this of all the school shootings, I think this is the first time that we've really gotten down to the nuts and bolts of how long this kid was drugged. You know what I mean?
I agree.
So let's go into 2010 when he was introduced to a different, non-stimulant ADHD drug Intuniv.
It was yep.
Go ahead. I mean, I did not find where they gave you the milligrams of this.
That was another thing that I felt was really lacking in the testimony of the psychiatrists. They did not go over the dosage. They talked about the drugs were changed several times. They talked nothing about blood work during the changes. They talked nothing about reporting any side effects to MedWatch. Really think it's a crime against humanity, and most of all, a trafficking of children into the psychiatric industry through the school system that is causing the drugging of the mind so disturbing that it would really lead somebody to committing a mass murder.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, if you look at, if you watch these, and I want my viewers to kind of go to YouTube and just type in, Cruz sentencing trial or hearing, and watch some of these, because number one, during this phase of it, they're kind of whispering to each other. You can barely hear the attorney. You can barely hear the psychiatrist. But what's even more interesting is when they're talking about the psychiatrists and their visits with Cruz, they have like no notes. There's like very little, notes taken that they can go, oh yeah, we had a conversation about, and there's nothing like, oh yeah, he was aggressive at school. That's it. and you're gonna give him more drugs. That's what you do. You know what I mean?
Well, the other interesting thing is with this particular doctor, they had stopped the Risperdal, and at night she went over again, not sure of herself, but saying that the mother had stopped the Risperdal or introduced it again. She felt it was important to introduce it again because he wasn't really responding. And she says, I think that the mom put her son back on the Risperdal. She stopped it at night, but did it twice during the day. So we have no idea really. I think that the defense team should have put a chart up of all the drugs and their dosages and their
when they
side
were
effects.
upped, when they were upped, when they were changed, when they were added, I mean, that would have been so easy on their part for the jury. Now there's a jury here. Okay. That would have been so easy for the jury to go, oh my God, since he was at least 9 years old. And I suspect it went much further beyond that. I'm thinking 5 years old is when this all started happening.
Well, Kelly, the defense position is that this Nicholas Cruz was, I want to say, a fetal syndrome baby and was like a crack baby. And, with all this drugging, I don't know why they would drug anybody who was born to addiction with this amount of drugs. It makes no sense to me. But that defense is ridiculous because there's a lot of children that have been born to fetal alcoholism that don't go and shoot up schools. What is a fact here? The FDA has black box warnings on these drugs, or most of these drugs, that are increased risk of suicide.
Suicidality, yeah.
And which will go into, he did try to commit suicide later on. And so I think, to me, it's the defense here is protecting the psychiatrists. They are dug into, they want to prove that this kid was born this way.
Yeah,
because
we're gonna go into that in just a little while. Let's finish his drugging. To what we know. I don't even think this is all of it. I got to tell you, I think there are such lousy notes that were taken by these psychiatrists. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, some of these
we
people
don't
haven't seen him in 10 years. So it's like, oh, did they have to go back and kind of doctor their notes? I don't know.
Well, yes, one doctor actually admitted to that she had to, it might have been this particular doctor, she, at the request, had to do a summary report, which is by law, I guess you have to, when you finish treating somebody, you have to, it was Lori Karp. She was requested to do a treatment summary. That treatment summary was done in 2018 when she was contacted by, I believe, the defense or the prosecution, but there was no summary report.
So again, it's just really sloppy, lousy note-taking on the part of these psychiatrists. And it's almost like they're like cattle. 15 minutes, boom, 50, next kid, bring him in. Yeah, let's up your dose. Okay, boom, 15 minutes. It's about money. I don't think there was any treatment here.
Well, Kelly, you have to remember also, at this time when he's being heavily drugged, the nation was watching, Diane Sawyer's piece onto the massive drugging of foster care kids, where the kids were holding up bags of psychiatric drugs. And these particular doctors were called pill mills. We have no idea, and I certainly wouldn't want to accuse anybody, but we have no idea where these particular psychiatrists fell into their associations in their treatment of other children. That's something I think I would have pulled out as the defense. But they, again, slow walk these psychiatrists through the massive drugging of this mass killer
Right.
And I think it's really, honestly, like you said, the best insight and the best evidence we have of the correlation between psychiatric drugging and school shootings.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's go on. So in 2010, he's on, he's been on Concerta, Focalin, Strattera, Risperdal, Intuniv, and then in 2012, it says that she lowered the Focalin, stopped the Risperdal at night, and then went back to the full dose later. And in December of 2011, when he was, 12 and a half years old, she says he was doing well. The main diagnosis was ADHD and maybe oppositional defiant disorder.
Right. And I believe that where she discontinued her treatment with him was in December. There was a change of insurance.
Yes.
Again, another indication that these psychiatrists are getting reimbursement money, and it's
unbelievable.
That's legislation.
So let's see. So I want to get this straight. We have Concerta, Focalin, Strattera, Risperdal, Intuitive. That's five different mind-altering drugs. Several at their highest dosage.
Mm-hmm.
By the time he's 12 and a half years old. So that's five that we know of. That's just what we know of. We don't know what happened prior to 2007. We haven't quite figured all that out yet. Mm-hmm. So then the next psychiatrist is Dr. Negin.
Oh, he was interesting.
So go ahead. Let's talk about Dr. Negin.
Okay, now one of the comments that he made was that most of the children in the area, he's like the go-to psychiatrist. Right. And the school in which Nicholas Cruz was enrolled in appeared to have a special relationship with them, where the teachers actually brought the child to the psychiatrist for med changes. And so there seemed to have been quite a bit of discussion about a letter that the school had sent to him about his behavior and their concern over the medications. And this particular psychiatrist said he never got the letter. Right. I thought that was amazing. Again, what you were saying, this lack of cohesive note-taking and responsible treatment. He appears to have said that he never received the letter, and then turned on the school and said, well, if it was such a concern for you, you should have gotten him hospitalized, or you should have done, there is such a thing as the Baker's Act or something like that. So he was clearly
which is involuntary submission to because of mental problems, involuntary in a hospital.
Right.
That's the Baker Act.
That's correct. Which clearly was his defense of not receiving the
letter.
Mm-hmm.
So he, Dr. Negin, again, he has decided that Nick Cruz has ADHD. And he said he has no medical illnesses. So he's on, he has him on Focalin XR for 20 milligrams, okay? And then he's got him on Risperdal, right? At, I think, 0.25 milligrams. Then he says that he also was a disruptive behavior disorder not otherwise specified, okay? So again, let's remind everybody what the adverse events of Focalin are: nervousness, restlessness, anxiety, sudden outbursts, mental or mood behavior changes, agitation, aggression, abnormal thoughts, and psychosis. Oh, he's not well. You're totally messing with his drugs. You're upping them, you're downing them, you're adding, you're deleting, and he's not better. Well, let's do some more chemical, lobotomy here. Let's change him up again. What does he do? He puts him on clonidine, right? Right?
It's disgusting. And now what is clonidine?
So clonidine, this is to treat hypertension, schizophrenia, or bipolar, of which he has none of those.
Off-label.
Right. So he has none of those. And the side effects that are associated with clonidine is irritability, mood changes, insomnia, nightmares, delusional perception, hallucinations, mental depression, vivid dreams, and nightmares. Well, let's add that one to the cocktail. Why not? Because he's not getting better. So let's add another drug that has all kinds of horrific side effects, right?
And he was complaining about nightmares.
Yes, he was
complaining. He had stomach problems. He had all these side effects, and it is so inhumane not to recognize that this arbitrary drugging of a young developing mind is just such a crime against humanity. To me, it is the making of a school shooter. It is absolutely whatever is left of his mind. How old is he now when he's seeing him?
Well, he was 12 and a half at that point when he went to Dr. Negan. And so Negan saw him from 2011 to 2017. And again, about 15 minutes when he saw him, about 15 minutes, whole lot of time here. So, I got to tell you, I keep looking at these drugs from the time this kid was so young, and they all act like it's just perfectly normal. When you watch these psychiatrists on the stand,
oh yeah,
they're the caregivers. They're really doing a good thing here for him with these drugs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really disgusting. It really is.
This defense team,
oh,
they're like brain dead. They are like brain dead. They're not asking any questions about the adverse events and how these drugs may have made him, okay, what he is.
Yeah. And speaking of the defense team, they are not only defending psychiatry, but they're really defending the assessment tools, let's
talk about those. So now we know he's been on six mind-altering drugs, okay, before the age of 12 and a half.
Yeah. Okay. So now how does he get on the drugs is
Right.
These assessment tools. Okay. That's what
Right.
parents face every day that they bring their kids to school, getting IEPs, which this kid had. Okay. So the assessment tools were done through, it's a publishing company called Pearson Publishing, and they publish all these checklists, whether it's for ADHD, whether it's for this particular one is adoptive behavior. It's called a Vineland 3. Okay, so here is the defense team are saying we can't use this data because we're not licensed to use it. We can't share the raw data of these diagnosing checklists because we're not qualified. And so the author, the publishing house, Pearson, places an affidavit into the court basically saying this stuff is copyrighted and nobody's qualified to use these unless they're used in their proper setting. And then the credit to the state, actually, at this point, they're like, wait a minute, we don't operate under the Association of Psychiatry and Psychology. We're qualified because we're attorneys. We operate under the legal system. And he basically squashes the affidavit. from the authors of Pearson. He
Mhm.
basically has to reprimand the defense team and says, you don't represent Pearson. I mean, I thought that was shocking, that the state is basically saying, and then they discredit the
Let,
checklist.
let me ask you something. So this checklist, it's my understanding that he was given this test.
Mhm.
Uh, Cruz was.
It's adaptive. Yeah, it's
Okay.
adaptive.
And so the argument here is his team, his defense team, and correct me if I'm wrong, they don't want that to be known what the results were.
That's correct.
Okay. And so they're saying that they're not experts and they, therefore they can't read it.
And they don't want the state reading it. Now,
Right.
if the state reads it, what the state already implied is that the psychiatrist, this is very damning, the psychiatrist that did all the drugging and all the diagnosing, their records don't correlate or match up to the school records.
Right.
So the school records are saying he's like a pretty good student. He's making these milestones. He can read, he can
Right.
retain information. That's very important in a death penalty case. They're basically, the state's saying this kid could reason. Okay.
Right.
The psychiatrists, the whole reason why they were drugging him was he can't reason. He's ADHD, he's this, he's that, he's got all these problems, therefore we need to drug him. So in a death penalty case, the state of mind is critical. Instead
Right.
of the defense team attacking, which I would have done if they were a good defense team, is go after the drugging, and that altered his mind. They're defending the psychiatrist. So they don't want this test introduced. And the state basically ripped up the test and said that it is actually, it's not valid, and it's basically subjective. And I think that's been the case all along, that Able Child's been saying, that so many organizations have been saying, is that these diagnoses are not based in science. They're not. And then he said, if we had, one thing I thought was very good, again, the subjectivity of ADHD in these checklists, the state said, if you did an MRI on somebody, we would bring in that technician and then MRI, and then we could determine and, discuss it. And so the defense team is saying, well, you can't have this data because you're not qualified to read it.
Well, first of all, that's a crap. Okay. You can't do an MRI on him and go, oh yeah, see that ADHD, unless you took an MRI of his brain when he was 5 years old, before he was drugged. You have no idea what's going on with his brain. You have nothing to compare it to. And even if they did an MRI and they go, yeah, people with ADHD, this is what their brains look like, right? Well, did they take ADHD drugs for the last 12 years of their life?
The drugs are what damaged this particular kid's thinking, and it's in the evidence of the side effects that each one of these psychiatrists failed to report through the MedWatch. They are mandated reporters, so they failed to do that. So
what's interesting? Their notes, when they're reading their notes, Sheila, in court, right? Which they're so thin, right? But none of their notes say, the Focalin isn't working. We upped it to da-da-da, and his behavior is worse. So maybe we'll take him off of it and see how he does. They never say that. What do? Oh, the Focalin's not working at 10 milligrams. Let's up it to 20, and let's add clonidine. It's ridiculous. They can't bring themselves to think that these drugs may actually be adding to the problem.
Well, and then you have, all the reporting of the hearings, which I found very interesting. In reading one of them today, the media really is like really going after, like, he was a monster. This kid was talking about eating people. I mean, that was one of the reports today. The media is failing to illustrate the dangers associated with the drugging of this child. And he was at one point a child. He could have been anyone's child. It is the drugging that damaged his brain. And it's evident in their lack of reporting to the MedWatch and their cocktail of what you called, which Kelly, I love, it's a lobotomy. And this industry, I will point out, doesn't have a good human rights record. Okay. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Well,
I mean, it's just, it's unregulated, and I find it amazing. And they have a tremendous amount of power, the drug companies and the psychiatric industry. And this defense is of them and not of this Nicholas Cruz that is facing the death penalty.
yeah, so, you brought up the media. I saw this headline. It says, this is an AP report, right? Psychologist, school shooter didn't get consistent treatment. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's what you got out of this sentencing hearing?
Well,
it never even occurred to this reporter to question the amount of mind-altering drugs this kid had had since he was a little kid.
It's sickening, because what they use those headlines for is to go to legislators to ask for massive mental health spending. Right. That happened in the aftermath of Sandy Hook. That happens each school shooting that takes place. They give more and more and more responsibility and money to the psychiatric industry. And you know what? Good on the state that is prosecuting, that they said, the association, the APA, the Association of Schools of Psychology, they don't have dominance over the court of law. You need to give us the raw data. I think it would be a great opportunity to get Pearson checklists on the stand. But they have threatened, I think, legal action. They've submitted copyright infringement.
So let me ask you, because you know how the systems work much better than I do. The state is involved here. And again, I'm going to just spread the responsibility around, okay? If we're going to put this kid to death, these people who are involved in his life, who were the caregivers, they need some responsibility too. Right. So in the state of Florida, what is the state's responsibility through their mental health system with this kid?
Well, you know that they had Henderson Behavioral Health, which is a vendor of the state of Florida, at this boy's house. So you had to take a look at the state of Florida, and it's not just Florida, it's every state. They have vendors that they use in foster care, in DCF. We saw that in the Sandy Hook shooting, they have the responsibility of hiring these behavioral health vendors that actually have a formulary of drugs that are approved to use on these children in state care. So there's absolutely no oversight. The state of Florida has a role here. It is so magnified in the fact that this behavioral health vendor is not being held to any accounts. As far as I know, they're not being sued. They haven't been dropped from the rolls. I think as a state, they should be excluded from any treatment. I'm sorry, the people you're hiring and you're sending in there were involved in this school shooting. So your company should be excluded from participation in these very, very lucrative behavioral health contracts. I think Able Child did we did a report on just the amount of money that behavioral health vendors get.
Sure.
And it's millions and millions of dollars.
So let's compare the lawsuit against the gun manufacturer in Sandy Hook, they had to cough up millions of dollars. I think it was Remington, right?
Mhm.
And
It's a
and it was
business.
because they're advertising. Okay, the advertising is what drew him to buy that gun, right? So let's look at the behavioral health people. Well, if advertising a gun is somehow creating, a mass shooter, why are we not suing the pharmaceutical companies? Why aren't these families suing the pharmaceutical companies? Why aren't they suing the state mental health agency, right? For the amount of mind altering drugs that were given to this kid, knowing full well what the adverse events could have been. Why don't they do that?
Well, they absolutely 100% should. I mean, I believe a story came out debunking the link between chemical imbalance and
Uh-huh.
um, um, disorders, and nothing
Well,
was done there.
there's no evidence to prove that the chemical imbalance causes anything, not depression, not bipolar, not ADHD, nothing. It's
Okay.
it's a theory.
Okay, it's a theory. Well, it would be a good thing to tell parents that when the school is pushing you into these diagnoses and then putting you on these mind-altering drugs. Sandy Hook was about the same thing. It was, Adam Lanza was in Birth to Three program that it usually includes heavy drugging. He was drugged throughout his life. His mother was a pro mental health. She wanted to get him the best care. We did that. He was treated at Yale Hospital, so here we have another exact copy of this, and it has nothing to do with guns, and it has to do, I'm not a big advocate of suing anyone. It's about legislation. Psychiatry started out as a carve out. We want to carve out a little area so we could treat these people. And now it has grown like a massive poisonous snake. And I think that we need to cut off its head, and we need to start to legislate appropriately to extract them from our garden, which is our beautiful children. This kid didn't have a chance. And, one of the things that really concerns me too about this trial, Kelly, is that, when he was brought in and he was questioned, he was medically cleared to be interrogated. Okay. So the officer, the detective, basically said, "You're medically cleared. The doctors looked at you." Okay. And if you see him in his interrogation, you see that he has right here where you get blood work done, a Band-Aid. I think that blood work needs to be released. That's very important. I know we left off at Dr. Keegan and his last treatment, but I could tell you that when he was brought in and he was medically cleared,
Right.
I'd like to know who that treating psychiatrist is and some of their background and qualifications. Not that I'm questioning their qualifications, but I'd like to know where they fit in the state, who's paying them, right? The state is, right? So the state is actually trying to put you to death, okay? And yet they're taking blood from you and no doubt drugging you. We know it was admitted in court that he is now heavily medicated.
Well, let's talk about his own admission during that interrogation. The 3 weeks prior to the shooting, he had taken a large amount of Xanax.
That's right. And he he tried to kill himself, not the first time, which is indicative of a side effect of
suicidality, from these drugs.
Right. So he basically took what is called he said that he took a 5-bar of Xanax. Now, he got it off the streets, he said, and what I find disturbing, and not like people don't have a lot to do in their life, but if you watch that video, it is, his entire behavior is, he doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where he lives. He is very disoriented. A lot of the medical questions were asked before he was read his rights. I mean, this is, but the fact that he admittedly said he took Xanax
3 weeks before the shooting.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about Xanax, okay? Because it is a blah 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 I'm losing my mind now. Trying to get it up here. I just wrote it. Anyway, it has a benzodiazepine. Thank you. It had to come into my mind. Benzodiazepine, very serious drug that can cause hallucinations, vivid nightmares, agitation, hallucinations, mood changes, vivid dreams. I mean, this is, again, and it has black box warnings on it too. So he took this by himself. This is a kid, he needs drugs. He's got to have these prescription drugs. His body they crave it now.
He's an addict.
Nobody is talking about this.
Well, which I found very interesting, that the detective was questioning him. He gave up his right. He said, I don't need a lawyer. I don't need this person, don't need anybody. But when he was really pressed about the voices in his head, and the detective was saying, well, what are these voices? They're telling you to do this. And he was trying to explain to him that these voices were telling me to do this. They wanted me to burn, destroy, and kill. And so the detective, trying to, in my judgment, get the death penalty for this kid, was saying, well, what are these voices telling you? Are they coming from inside of you or outside of you? And at one point, Nicholas Cruz said, are you a psychologist? I need to talk to somebody who would understand what's going on in here. And so the interview stopped, the detective left, he came back, and with more questioning and about the voices, and Nicholas took the detective showed him the clipboard and said, he's like, who's making these questions up? It was the psychologists that were standing on the other side of the door, according to the detective, that were questioning his voices and where they were coming from. That's disturbing to me, when the state is planning on putting him to death, and the state, they are advocating to putting him to death, and then the state is actually not allowing an independent psychiatrist that's not associated with any case or anything like that. It's employed by the state. And so I find the whole thing to be a huge conflict of interest. Now, I have, politically speaking, and I know it hurts, I saw the parents in that courtroom, but it's really important for the parents to understand that in order to stop these school shootings, we have to get down to causality. And it is not the guns, okay? It is the treatment of these children at a very young age. And I was, Kelly, as you know, I started Able Child based on the fact that my child was given a checklist that I filled out. I didn't know that I was actually contributing to the diagnosis of a mental illness when I was filling it out. I was never informed of that. We have to really kind of focus in on this. And that's what this trial really is about, is to try to get to stop these school shootings. You can put this kid to death because there's going to be another one, Kelly.
Right. Well, there's going to be, because nobody wants to look at what is causing them. Okay. And again, this is such a specific time in history with this sentencing trial that we are finally getting the psychiatrists to come out
Mm.
and tell us the actual, mind altering drugs that the kid was given. I still want to know. I don't believe it actually started in 2007. I think he was drugged prior to that. And we knew he was. We just don't know how much because they haven't gotten to that in the sentencing trial. I don't know that they'll ever bring up the pediatrician to talk about it. But, if you're seeing a pediatrician, you're like 5 years old, right?
Well, Kelly, the defense is focusing on the mother. Let's talk about the biological mother for a minute. She was in the system, okay? She was a drug user and she was in jail. And, there's a lot of elements of human trafficking also in this particular case that I find very disturbing about the role of how this adoption took place. The state DCF was involved with this mother. It had to have been if she was incarcerated, right? The state was involved in that. So these records are, we have to pull the thread, right? The weed goes deep in the garden. So we have to get to the root of it. And it is not through the guns that we're going to do that. The state, I don't know how this is going to turn out. The jury, I'm hopeful, has been somewhat exposed to some of the drug aspects of these shootings because we have made headway over the last 20 years. People are asking questions about these drugs. They are. So I don't know. It only takes one juror to say, I don't think he deserves the death penalty. The state is doing an awful job. It's an ongoing, the defense is doing an awful job and the state has a conflict of interest. So,
Sure, they have a huge conflict of interest because they were the mental health vendor. Right? They're paying these psychiatrists to drug him.
Yeah. So, so they're kind of actually, I've watched the two defense and the state kind of interacting with each other and they are trying to help each other in certain ways. I thought the Pearson piece was very, very interesting. I would love to see how that plays out on the validity of these tests. Now, remember, the state has to prove that he was capable and it was premeditated, and if you're talking about voices over a period of time, which these drugs induce those voices, right, Kelly?
Right.
So is that a contributing factor of
it's a mitigating factor, and the fact that his defense team is not all over these adverse events associated with these drugs is criminal. He is entitled to a healthy defense and he's not getting it. He's not getting it yet. Okay, maybe they'll come out of their shell and start going after it down the road, but right now
they're not going to.
I don't think so either because I don't think they know. I don't think they've put the work in to go, God, maybe it was, this kid was drugged a lot.
Right. And the other thing is the questionable, in the beginning, Nicholas Cruz had about 800,000, almost $1 million estate that was liquidated. So how he fell into the public defender's hands to me is very suspicious, and one of the women that were, was on the whole gun issue and was brought in by the state. She happened to have a very famous attorney representing her. And I believe she was in charge of his estate and she lived in a trailer park. So I don't understand how she got such adequate and such high-powered defense. And meanwhile, this kid has had $1 million estate and is in the public defender's office. I don't think that's by design. I hate to say, I think that's by design. I just think that there's a whole human trafficking element to the drugging of young children. That's just a reality, you know. And you can look at Senator Nancy Schiffer, who was very on target with this, with her investigative work into the Department of Children and Family Services. So this is just it's disgusting.
Well,
and I don't know.
Like we said at the beginning, you know, this is, as far as I'm concerned, psychiatry on trial. This sentencing hearing is psychiatry on trial. I think that all of these people involved in his treatment and care need to be held responsible too. I just do. I'm sorry. So you spend 15 minutes with a kid and you give him a cocktail of mind-altering drugs and we're good to go? I don't think so. This has to start now, that these people, there has to be responsibility beyond the drugged kid. There has to be.
Well, Kelly, you know, I do want to say that there was a case many, many years ago that a famous reporter did on Willowbrook out of the state of New York. And it was disgusting what psychiatry was doing. They had human beings in a room when they used to institutionalize people, and they were naked in their own, it was just disgusting. And Geraldo broke the story on Willowbrook. This is this industry on steroids, okay? We have to start having the conversation that this is criminal. It is criminal to drug 7-year-olds. It is criminal to drug them with mind-altering drugs for 20 years and don't expect them to be brain damaged into the point of picking up weapons and hurting society. So yeah, I think they need to be held responsible. You know, I don't think there's going to be a mistrial. I think, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to, I think what happens is you go on death row. So if he gets convicted, and you can appeal it. And
well, even if the jury does decide on the death penalty, it'll be years and years and years where he'll be in appeal. Even then, I mean, we're not a country that executes kids. We just don't. It's a very tough thing to do. We'll have to wait and see. I'm hoping that at least when they make that decision, it'll be based on more information than what they're getting from his defense team right now. Anyway, Sheila, we have gone through our appropriate amount of time. You, as always, are unbelievably informed on these issues. I know that you and I are going to get together again sometime down the road about Uvalde, because much more information is going to come out on that one. But I know you'll stay on top of this. I don't know when the decision is going to be made, but I look forward to having you back on. Thank you so much for you know, coming out today and sharing your thoughts on what's going on with Nikola Cruz's sentencing hearing. Look, this is Don't Ask That Question. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for all you do.